For Veterans Only is a national television news magazine for America's veterans and a presentation of Veterans Productions USA.
Welcome to For Veterans Only. I'm Paula Padine. This week we're in Dalton, Georgia, a city famous from years gone by as the route to Atlanta. During the Civil War, soldiers from both the North and South wintered over here without fighting as they prepared for Sherman's march. This year on Memorial Day weekend, a similar type of unity is taking place, one that is recognizing all our veterans for their efforts. Although there were many Memorial Day celebrations across the country, this one at Dalton, Georgia is sure to be one of the most unique. For these celebrants, their day started early as they prepared for the first dedication of the Avenue of Flags. There were 558 flags in all. Each one was unraveled and put in specific areas around the Dalton Courthouse. The idea for the Avenue of Flags was started by the Georgia-based group, United We Stand.
The initial meeting was 3 concerned citizens. All 3 of them happened to have somebody that was serving in the Persian Gulf at the time, back in January, got together and they wanted to know what they could do for the community and really wanted to focus in on a long-term project, something that would be for years around so that everybody would constantly be reminded of the patriotic, surge of emotion that everybody was experiencing at the time, and started talking about what types of projects. And this is a project I've wanted to see us do for a long time, but you needed a group like United We Stand to get behind it and do all the work. So we started in January and we met weekly and just grew and grew. We had more people come in to work on it, and the local merchants and community just got behind us and supported everything we did, and we spent 4 months working.
The results were well worth the efforts. From the beginning, the group was swamped with phone calls and applications to create this patriotic site. As the president of United We Stand, did you ever think you would get this many flags?
Not in my wildest dreams. When we first started this project, I came down and stepped off around the courthouse and figured that we could probably, if we got 135 flags, we would make a good showing. Of course, at that time, I was planning on putting them about 10 foot apart, up and down inside the sidewalk, and of course, avoiding the trees where the flags would hit the trees. And I had figured that 135, would look real good. And then when we got 200, I thought, oh boy, our goal was 250. And before we could cut off the orders, we had 558.
Because of the overwhelming response, the layout plans for the flags had to be adjusted.
Well, we were pretty far into the project before we knew exactly how the flags would be displayed, and we didn't know if we really wanted to make an avenue up and down both sides of some of these key streets or whether we wanted to mass them around the courthouse. And I think the architect's plan turned out to be the very best, to put them generally in the courthouse area.
In addition to the flags, there was a special dedication ceremony. One of the Army's top generals during Operation Desert Storm drove in from Atlanta to be a part of this Memorial Day ceremony.
This year particularly was important because of the Persian Gulf crisis. Many people have congratulated us over and over again. Our soldiers, our sailors, airmen, Marines. There's American people that won that war over there, and all of us feel that way. The support we got from the American people was magnificent. No other way to describe it. And so we're about out country and saying thank you, and thanks a bunch, because they saved a lot of lives, and they won that war for us. And so it was just manifests our thanks for the great job they did for us.
A Dalton High School choir also performed. There was a wreath laying, but perhaps most important was the commemoration of those who had served their country from past wars, some as prisoners of war.
Lyman C. Maples, Germany, 4 months. T.F. Ogles, Germany, 4 months. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas V. Parrott, Vietnam, 67 months. FT, would y'all stand up for Tommy? Tommy Parrott is in Atlanta, and he's very, very ill, and he nor Millie could be with us today, but his in-laws are standing in for Tommy. Private James Pippin, Germany, 4 months. First Lieutenant Fred W. Posey, Germany, 4 months. And Grady W. Putnam, Germany, 25 months. Let's give a hand to these people, please.
And for those whose sons and daughters are still serving as a part of Operation Desert Storm.
Well, I write him every day. I pray a lot. That's about all you can do. Just try to keep positive about it.
The Greens purchased a flag for their son, and they are hopeful he will return home in September. In addition to the display of American flags, Dalton also displayed 16 flags for prisoners of war, or those missing in action from their area. That's one of the largest numbers in almost any U.S. city. Joanne Shirley is very familiar with those statistics. In addition to being the ceremony coordinator for this event, she helps represent the state of Georgia for those who are still POWs or MIAs. She has done so for more than a decade and says that the negotiation process in finding these veterans varies from year to year.
We went through some very lean years. The Carter-Nixon Ford administrations did very little to help us with the accountability for our men. But once President Reagan came in, and he seemed to have a personal commitment and personal feel for the families, we found that the government turned to the League of Families and said, well, exactly what do you want? And we laid out our objectives, and our objectives became government policy. And so, I feel like that the last 6 years, 7 years, we've had a real focus on accountability and what can be done. We have regular meetings with the Vietnamese and the Lao governments, technical talks where we give them information. It's an exchange of information in hopes that we can get in and excavate sites and repatriate remains, as well as focus on the possibility that there are live Americans. Conspiracy and cover-up, not now. Now, possibly many years ago when we first got started, there were things they didn't tell us. But now I feel like they're as open with the families as they can be. And I must say I have a real problem with some people who feel like they should know everything. I don't think that the case files on all our missing men should be open to everybody. It's really nobody else's business what my brother's case says, except my mom and dad and myself. And if we choose to make that public, and I question the motivation and why they want to get access into case files, they really aren't their business. So I feel like the focus is there. We've gotten more accountability in the last 2 years than we've ever had before.
She says she's proud the people of Dalton, Georgia have joined together to help her in dealing with the fact that her brother is missing in action, and she's happy the patriotism in her city is strong enough to have the Avenue of Flags. The flags will be displayed 6 times throughout the year to commemorate veterans from past to present. Blue Ash, Ohio also wanted to remember their veterans, and they did so with an unveiling of sculptures representing all veterans from as early as the 1800s. The Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs attended the ceremony.
The public respect for the effectiveness of the troops, the public respect for the military as a whole, the current military, rubs off in a very positive fashion on all of our veterans. So I think all veterans are justifiably proud of the service of this generation of veterans.
He also feels that veterans will benefit from the latest round of legislation passed on Capitol Hill.
Our budget's been improved. The programs have been liberalized for all veterans, not just for Desert Storm. And it's a very practical situation we believe we find ourselves in. Now, we never have every dollar we want. We never have everything quite in place as we want. But I believe we're doing very well in the aftermath of Desert Storm.
He says his department is taking steps in the right direction despite some problems it's facing with long-term health care for aging veterans.
We're making steady progress, plus we have a commission that's looking at long-term care for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years as to where the VA should be and how we should serve the veterans over that long period of time. And they'll report to us in September. Then we'll discuss the matter with the White House and with the Congress to see what sort of a package we can put together for long-term veterans health care.
And he's happy so many people are taking the time this year to honor those who help preserve our freedom.
Memorial Day, we pause to honor all veterans, especially those who gave their lives defending our country. And we do so proudly, we do so with reverence, and we do so with an appreciation for all veterans who at any time and any one of the challenges facing our country served in our armed forces. So Memorial Day, like Veterans Day, are the two very special days by which the nation honors, remembers its veterans, and we're pleased to be part of it.
Moments like this in Dalton and around the country often inspire musicians to create patriotic songs. But for many Vietnam veterans, the music in their mind is not so sweet. Brian Patrick recently met with a musician who has translated those memories into a haunting melody.
Many of you can relate to being 19 in Vietnam. In fact, many Vietnam veterans still relive some of those experiences from those past years. It was just one such experience that inspired the new music video, 19 in Vietnam, by award-winning musician Pete Kennedy. Pete, you've had tremendous commercial success, yet this project is really a labor of love. How did you get started?
Brian, I was on my way home from a show, and I stopped in at a little all-night restaurant. And I was sitting at the counter eating, and the fellow next to me just struck up a conversation. I had a notebook out, and he had a notebook out too. He told me he was a writer and that he wrote strictly about Vietnam vets matters. And he started talking and telling me his story, and it turned out that he was a Vietnam vet who had been back for 16 years and had never, for the first 15 years, had never been able to talk to anyone, including his own wife and kids, about his experience there. He had had his jaw blown off and one of his shoulders, and he had just sort of come out and was beginning to deal with these things. So he was approaching people like me, a total stranger, at this little all-night cafe. And as he talked, I got completely fascinated with what he was saying, because he didn't talk about, for one thing, he didn't talk about politics at all. He didn't say we should or we shouldn't have been in Nam. He talked about the experience of being a 19-year-old kid, spending your 19th birthday, as one guy told me, you know, crawling through a hole, you know, looking for Viet Cong, and 10,000 miles from home, you know, with a gun in one hand, hand grenade in the other hand, and a lot of decisions to make that are really too big for a kid that age, you know. And so this is what really drew me into what he was saying. Anyway, he talked, and he said the weirdest thing was coming home and feeling so alienated, you know. He had blood thrown on him in a bus in San Francisco and stuff like that. And he said that was the worst part of the whole experience for him, and that's what made him clam up for 15 years. And so anyway, he talked, and I kidded him. I said, is it okay if I take notes? I'm a songwriter. And he said, yeah, sure, maybe it'll come out and be a song and a video someday, you know. And so we laughed about that, and I did take notes as he talked. And anyway, I got up to leave eventually, and I slapped him on the back, and I said, well, it's just very casual. I said, well, welcome home. And I started walking down the aisle, and he turned to me and he said, hey. And I turned back and he said, in 16 years, you're the first person that ever said that. And I went home and wrote this song.
All right, let's take a look at 19 in Vietnam.
Well, I'm a bush hog scratching for a rat underground in the jungle of the valley as shot. I gave him 18 rounds, but he didn't go down. I'm dealing with the devil again. I turned 19 in Vietnam. 19 in Vietnam. Well, we started out thinking we were some kind of heroes fighting just like our daddies did. Now the gung-ho crew is very few. The rest is just frightened kids. Kids who turn 19 in Vietnam. They turn 19 in Vietnam. till they ship you home, but there ain't no welcome there when you're 19, Vietnam. 19 in Vietnam.
It's haunting, gives you the chills.
Well, it's funny you should say that because we actually did shoot it, of course, at the wall. It was outdoors and it was one of the coldest nights of the year in Washington. And as we started shooting, it started raining first and then it turned into sleet and freezing rain. So when people ask me if they say, hey, I really like the special effects, I said there aren't any special effects. It was real rain and snow.
Of course, being in the shadow of that wall is a very emotional experience. And I imagine that all translates into what you're doing here.
I think it shows up on the videotape. You know, you can't fake that, really. You can't pretend that you're having that kind of experience. But being there at the wall, like you say, there's something about that space that where that happens, and it lends, I think, an import to the video that we couldn't have possibly gotten any other way. We couldn't have set up in a soundstage and done the same thing.
Of course, Vietnam was a very controversial issue. The war was so bitter and there were two sides of it, but this really is not about the political issues or about whether the war should have been or shouldn't have been. It really focuses on the experience of the person, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's funny, I've had people come up to me after concerts and say, you really nailed it, we never should have been there. And other people have come up and said, you really nailed it, we should have paved the place, you know? And they're both right and they're both wrong, because I'm not really dealing with that issue, you know? I'm dealing with, as you said, the experience of being a kid, you know, in combat, a long way from home, which I think that applies to Desert Storm, Vietnam, World War II, World War I, and every other war that's ever happened.
So the video is dedicated to all of those who've served our country.
That's why it says that at the beginning, yeah. It's specifically about a Vietnam vet, but it deals with every veteran of every war.
It's a very, very good video. How would I get a hold of a copy if our viewers want to catch 19 in Vietnam? How do they get it?
Maybe we can get the address up, but they can send for it in Washington through Joe Hansard, who directed the video and produced it. And yeah, they can definitely get a copy.
Okay. Thanks, Pete, for being with us, and thanks for 19 in Vietnam.
Thank you.
Because veterans' benefits are constantly changing, the Department of Veterans Affairs has prepared a special booklet entitled A Guide to Veterans' Benefits. For a free copy of this informative and timely publication, write to VA Hotline, Post Office Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky 40201. If you're experiencing a particular problem in qualifying for veterans' entitlements, the Department of Veterans Affairs will provide you with direct assistance. Address your correspondence to VA Hotline, Post Office Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky 40201.
Next week on For Veterans Only, we'll have a look at two warbirds from two different eras. Don Murray will show us the B-24 Liberator bomber from World War II, while Mike Victor will profile the F-4 Phantom from Vietnam. I'm Paula Padine from Dalton, Georgia. Thanks for being with us, and we hope you'll join us again next time on For Veterans Only.
Share For Veterans Only with your friends and other veterans. A VHS copy of this week's program is available for $24.95, including postage and handling. To order your copy of For Veterans Only, call area code 606-283-8170. That's 606-283-8170. You can charge your order on Visa or MasterCard or pay by check or money order by writing to For Veterans Only, P.O. Box 474, Florence, Kentucky 41022. That's For Veterans Only, P.O. Box 474, Florence, Kentucky 41022.
For Veterans Only is made possible by the Military Veterans Network of ITT Sheridan, welcoming, training, and assisting military and veteran reunion planners. By Galaxy Tours of Wayne, Pennsylvania, a world leader for national and international group travel. The producers thank this station and other public television stations for their assistance in making this program available. For Veterans Only is also telecast on the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service for the benefit of the men and women serving on active duty in our armed forces at home and abroad.